Hey there, welcome into Unpaid Interns. It is Wednesday afternoon, December 9th, and we have another great guest to you today. I know many IU football fans out there are very sad. The old Oaken Bucket game just canceled. They announced this afternoon, but hopefully we're going to brighten your spirits, have a little fun, and we're talking to an IU alum and now play-by-play announcer in many roles, including ESPN and the Philadelphia Union, Dave Leno. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Griffin, and hopefully you and all your viewers are safe, happy, and healthy for this holiday season. And I know you've had a lot of exceptional guests on here, so I'm really privileged, and thank you for the invite today.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And of course, you're an IU alum now doing great things. But I wanted to take it back 10 years ago. Just last week was the 10-year anniversary of Indiana Volleyball making the Sweet 16, the only time that the program has done it. I went back. They had the link to your call, which was pretty fun to listen to. University gym sounded like the roof was going to explode. What are your memories of calling Indiana Volleyball and specifically from that game and that moment?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was definitely one of my fondest memories of broadcasting at Indiana. That year was such a rewarding experience to play a small part. I'm just a broadcaster, but I got to travel with the team all over the country. I used to broadcast IU volleyball in sophomore, my junior and senior years, and very grateful to the athletic department for the opportunity to do that. That specific night, I remember, just to give some context to everybody, Indiana was paired in a regional grouping, if you will, with Miami, Tennessee, and IU. And so the victor out of all those would go, and I believe there was one other school, and the victor of all those four teams would go to the Sweet 16 to Dayton. And Indiana ended up beating Miami first and foremost, and I believe that was another 5-set match. And then we had to play Tennessee. But what I was referring to was initially, I believe this is correct, that regional was supposed to be at Tennessee, but they had some big Christmas show at Thompson Bowling Arena. And so the regional was held at Indiana. I believe Tennessee was the higher seed. And that Tennessee match was so thrilling. It went back and forth. Indiana won in 5 sets, as you mentioned, going to their first Sweet 16 in school history. I was on the call. I remember just being so loud and boisterous, and the highs and lows of calling that I ended up getting sick, losing my voice. I think I called the Sweet 16 match against USC sick in Dayton, but it was well worth it. That program has been through a lot of challenging times and a lot of like I mentioned, the roller coaster ride. And for them in that year to win so many memorable games, like beating Penn State at home, Minnesota, a couple cool road victories, having a very good, I believe they started out undefeated in non-conference play. And then to get to the Sweet 16, led by Ashley Benson. The coach at the time was Sherry Dunbar, Taylor Whitmer, Jordan Haverly on the outside. I can go back and remember it like it was yesterday. So for me to be on the call and paint that detailed picture and take some fans through it, I can still close my eyes and take me back to sitting in the bleachers underneath the scoreboard with all the pandemonium there. So well-deserved. I know that was a long answer to your first question today, but I'm smiling here thinking of how much that win meant for the program still to this day.
Yeah, I encourage anyone who hasn't heard the call. Indiana Volleyball put it out on their Twitter last week to go back and listen to it, because it's certainly, if you're a Hoosier fan, I think put a smile on your face. It was really fun to listen to. We were talking before, you mentioned you were in the stands for the 2007 Old Oaken Bucket game, which was the game-winning field goal kick by Austin Starr. Was just curious if you had other fond IU memories that stand out, whether for you that was in the stands or broadcasting.
Well, there's a lot. That particular game, I was there as a fan in 2007. Austin Starr kicks the game-winning field goal against Purdue to win the Old Oaken Bucket, and I'm just in current events. It's tough to see that the Old Oaken Bucket game for this year's edition, and probably one of the most historic seasons in Indiana football history was canceled. But I hope IU does well in their bowl game. I'd love to see them get a big victory from what Tom Allen and the coaching staff and the players have accomplished this year. Again, amid the injury with Penix and now Tuttle coming in, I've been following from afar. Hendershot looks really good, the tight end Freifogel. So so happy that Fred Glass made that hire for Tom Allen to elevate him to head coach, and for Scott Dolson and the rest of the athletics department to be behind him and what they're building at IU. I remember, both end zones were open, right? And they closed the north end zone. They put all those athletic department facilities. That's when I was almost leaving and graduating Indiana. And then for them to close the other end zone and make that the training tables and the Excellence Academy, whatever they call it now there, that's just awesome. So that big win in 2007, when I believe Terry Hepner's health was failing, it was very emotional for everybody. And I know Jane Hepner was there on the sideline after Austin Starr kicks that field goal. So that was just awesome to see. I remember calling a few Indiana football games, and we actually did it with WIUX, the student radio, from the press box. I remember calling an Indiana Northwestern game, and I make this call at the end. Maybe an IU player made a sack on CJ Boucher, the quarterback at the time, and I said something like, "And this game is signed, sealed, and delivered." And yeah, I know it's a cliche line from like a Motown song, but I think it got a lot of the IU press corps laughing in hysterics. So that's what I'm all about, having fun on the call. But look, Griffin, I remember, when I used to travel from, I didn't have a car on campus my freshman year, picking up the equipment from my dorm room at Wright, going across the campus to 8th Street, the journalism building, to WIUX station house, and having to schlep all that equipment, that radio stuff, and which honestly was a privilege. I'm not complaining. From there all the way to Bill Armstrong Stadium, the other side of campus. And I remember doing that for WIUX, doing some college basketball games above the tubas at Assembly Hall. Also IUS TV, writing for the Indiana Daily Student. Sophomore year, I was the football columnist. Then that shifted to me doing, as you mentioned, some broadcasting with the athletics department, where my junior and senior years, I was the voice of Indiana volleyball and also softball. You mentioned the Sweet 16 year. My senior year, right before I left Indiana, the team in softball in 2011 made a regional to the NCAA tournament in Missouri right after the Joplin tornado hit in Missouri. But that, of course, was in Columbia. So just traveling around the country with those two teams in particular, getting all this broadcast experience at Indiana was a blessing. And I like to think that if it wasn't for IU, my career on the TV side would not have taken off at a young age, because in 2010, the Big Ten Network was starting, and it was a right place, right time thing. They knew I did a lot of stuff at Indiana with the Olympic sports. I got my first TV gig doing Indiana-Ohio State field hockey live on the Big Ten Network before Student U started. So that was on the real linear network on TV. 2 weeks later, local candidate, of course, but got the call. They had confidence in me. I did Michigan, Indiana men's soccer in prime time on a Saturday night. And after leaving IU, I got a lot of freelance opportunities with the Big Ten and other minor league gigs, and which propelled me to getting in with ESPN in 2012. So if it wasn't for getting involved all over Indiana from a young age and taking that advantage of all the opportunities, I'd be remiss without mentioning I was very involved with WTIU, the PBS affiliate at Indiana, from freshman year to sophomore year, getting on air, hosting these 5-minute news breaks and working with professionals where it was their full-time jobs. And I was given a lot of on-air opportunity and going all around the state and outside the state, covering Indiana basketball or football. I remember taking a trip to Ann Arbor, to Kentucky, doing Indiana-Kentucky rivalry. So a lot of experience doing play-by-play, radio, TV, anchoring, reporting, also doing some news stuff. I was very involved, and I encourage anybody listening who's still at Indiana to not just, say I want to be a play-by-play person or be an anchor reporter. Be as versatile as you can, because that will help you when you graduate Indiana and make you a prime candidate to land somewhere.
You certainly did a lot at IU in your 4 years there. one thing I was thinking, you mentioned the calling WIUX football games in the press box. They've actually moved the student radio broadcasters on the roof of the press box. So these days, the press box doesn't get to hear the student broadcasters, though I was very grateful this year. They actually moved us into a suite due to them not being filled due to no fans. So that was a little bit of a unique experience just this year as well. But the press box no longer gets to hear the student broadcasters, fortunately or unfortunately.
Yeah, you're going from the outhouse to the roof, now to the penthouse to the suite level. Yes. That's awesome. It is. I'll tell you what, calling a game in Indiana, I would imagine for a lot of your viewers in the IU sports media department still, it's tough, right? Because you're high up. And I remember doing the game, the Indiana Northwestern game, very well. We were to the left of the press box, right when you come off the elevator to the left on the third row. Obviously, no open air press box for us. We were calling the game through the window, and I remember just having to call that game through the binoculars the whole time. So that's quite a challenge. And I'm assuming for you, when you did the game from the suite level, I don't know if you could open the window and kind of get the game sounds, or if it was just coming through your headset, if you had connection to all the Nat sounds. But it's very challenging. I know the TV booth is high up as well. I used to walk around the press box after games, football games ended. I was seemingly the only one up there with the media relations department doing their post-game wraps and going up to the coaches level where the PA announcer sat, where the TV booth was. Never got to call an Indiana football game on TV yet, but maybe one day I'll be back there in that booth, which would come full circle. So a lot of memories of that IU press box and that facility, Memorial Stadium. Kudos to the athletics department, really giving a lot of resources to football. It's well deserved, and I'm happy for everybody involved that football is starting to take off.
It's been an exciting season for certain, and you're right too about being high up. I mean, the unique way Memorial Stadium is built, the press box is very far from the field, and I would agree. Have some trouble recognizing player numbers with my own eyes. Wanted to shift a little bit and talk about some of the things you've done in your career in the last 10 or so years, and wanted to start with a really cool thing you did over the summer, and I was really happy to take part of, and I know many media members across the country were as well, is you had media members from play-by-play announcers such as Kenny Albert to sideline reporters and producers, and would have them on a Zoom and be able to ask questions. It was just a really informative and fun way to allow especially student journalists to keep on learning. What was your inspiration behind that? And I guess what kind of impact did you feel like you were able to create with that project?
Well, I appreciate that you were involved, and so many of your colleagues at Indiana joined us too. That meant a lot to see so many Indiana faces on those Zooms. And I'll be very honest with you. I knew nothing about Zoom prior to this pandemic. I feel like I know a little bit about social media, but as far as, those platforms, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, what you're using here, StreamYard, and others, I just wasn't well versed. But when sports shut down, and a lot of us that are having graduated and our jobs were quite frankly halted, I was thinking of ways that I could still stay connected with people in the business. But it wasn't really like just so much, oh, this is what I'm going to get out of it. And I'm not that type of guy. I was looking for ways to help others in the business that were in a similar spot with me, because there was a lot of negativity, dejection. A lot of us still weren't getting paid, lost their jobs. Sports was on hiatus. A lot of us weren't working from the start of that, maybe for 3, 4, 5 months. Some of our friends in minor league baseball had their seasons totally lost, which is devastating. And I know there's a lot. I do want to say I've been reading and following the minor league baseball news, that there's been a lot of layoffs today with the reduction of games in minor league baseball for the 2021 season. And my thoughts are with anybody that's going through that, whether it's themselves or some other front office people. And it's important for all of us to check in on friends or someone we may know through social media to see how they're doing and everything. I think that's really important. And that essentially, Griffin, was the reasoning behind all this, was to teach, to inspire, to educate, because I didn't have a lot of that coming out of college. I had nobody, getting me jobs, graduating from Indiana. I did not come out with a full-time job out of Indiana, and I did a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of the work that we highlighted on the top of this program, and that's okay. And it was a big learning experience, and I'm man enough to say it taught me a lot about how competitive and rigorous this business is. I think there's a lot of young people, and I'm one of them that wants to make it so big at a young age, coming out of school, because you have all this experience. But at the end of the day, you are. At least I can just speak for myself. I had a great experience in college, but I needed to take those steps to start from the bottom floor and slowly work my way up. And I think a lot of people, believe that there's money and notoriety that comes at a young age, and I think that comes over time. If you do great work, you treat people with respect, and you make the great relationships and use your network to help you build from one gig to the next. And that's what I did in my career. And that's what I think that Zoom was all about. It was for me to connect with other people going through the same thing. It started off with, I think, like 20 people. I put it out there on social media, just saying how everybody was doing, how their family is, who's impacted by COVID, what is COVID. And then as we did like 3 or 4 nightly sessions, I got to thinking, well, there's a lot of broadcast people on this call. Now, there were several people that were just, interested, and maybe some people that knew of me. But it was a heavy broadcast contingent. It got me thinking, well, maybe I'll utilize my contacts and see if we can make this, more informative, where we can have, while we're not working, let's have an educational session. Let's keep us all positive and revved up for when we do come back. And that led me to asking, first and foremost, from the Philadelphia Union, a guy I work with, the legendary JP Dellacamera, does a Union play-by-play, also does the national team games on Fox, and he's called 15 or 16 World Cups on the women's and men's side. So JP was so gracious, came on, and we hosted, gosh, it might have been a 3-4 hour session with JP, just picking his brain. But I really didn't want to be the star of this Zoom. That's not what it was all about. I made it where people could come on, and I just was the moderator, the facilitator, if you will, and this, being on there. And I wanted people to ask questions to JP. Yes, sometimes they ask questions to me too, but to pick JP's brain. And that got me to asking Kevin Harlan to come on. And that was a 4-hour session with Kevin. And when he was doing these mock play-by-plays and showing us his board, that was great. Kenny Albert came on, Mike Corey, had a producer, Joel Kittay. Sean McDonough also came on. And I'm really grateful for those people to come on. We also had a sideline reporters roundtable, as you mentioned, with Marissa Pillar, Renee Washington, and Danny Wexelman. Very talented reporters that I've worked with in the industry, and they explained how they go about reporting or hosting, even doing some play-by-play opportunities. So it started off with maybe a 15 to 20 person session, and then it grew to over 100 people wanting to get on this thing. And again, these weren't like 30 minute to an hour sessions. These really were like 4-hour sessions when a lot of us weren't working, and I think got us all fired up to learn from a lot of these legends about the biz. But I didn't keep it just broadcasting. I'll end with this. It was, about, one time we talked about remote broadcasting and Remy's, like ESPN calls them, or micros, like the Big Ten Network, from doing games from the studio. Now we see ESPN doing games from the announcer's home, and the producers and the graphics people are all at their house producing these awesome events. So it was important to inform everybody out there about, what was going on, how our industry was changing. But I think it inspired a lot of people to keep going for it, keep your dreams alive, despite COVID shutting things down in our industry, and a lot of us having to go under unemployment. And when sports does come back, we're going to come back even stronger. So I hope a lot of people that are watching this can go back and search those YouTube Zoom videos, because they're all up there. And I put together like these 20-point PowerPoints just to tell people what I went through and give my experience. Not that it's all that's, a lot of it was my opinion and what, things that I learned. And I did that because I want people to know things that I didn't know. And that was really the reasoning behind all these Zoom broadcast meetings. A lot of people commented to me, Griffin, that it was almost like a college class being in journalism school. And that just makes me smile that if it touched one or two people, if a couple people learned some things and met some cool guests that they could interact with like I'm doing with you right now, then the Zoom was worth it. And I still to this day, I go back and watch some of them. And I really think they impacted the broadcast community for those that took interest in it. So thank you for asking about it. And I miss doing them, and maybe we'll bring them back.
It was definitely a really valuable experience for many people involved. And I know many people really appreciated you starting them up because as you said, I think especially in those summer months with no sports, it was hard to find motivation when you didn't know sports were going to come back. Wanted to talk about some of your experience you've had in just the last couple months with sports coming back. And one cool experience I saw, especially as a tennis fan personally, you were able to call some of the U.S. Open on the radio. Obviously, it was a very different U.S. Open this year. What was that experience like? And also, what are kind of the fundamentals of calling tennis on the radio? Because that's not something you hear about too much.
Very challenging to do tennis on the radio. So background for me is it might not look like it, but I am a big tennis player, played growing up, played in high school, did not play in Indiana. I think I went to like a club, not even a tryout, but like an event or just a hit. And I guess it just wasn't for me. I wasn't good enough, but I feel like I've got better since I've come back home to the Philadelphia area and having graduated. So game has definitely stepped up. But been very involved with tennis, not just playing local tournaments in the area, but broadcasting. Did the U.S. Open in 2013 and 14 on radio as like a sideline reporter. I called a doubles final in one of those 2 years. Then didn't work it, and then actually got on the TV side working for the World Feed, which I still do. Also do World Team Tennis with Billie Jean King's Philadelphia Freedoms. And tennis was huge for me this particular year in a crazy, unprecedented 2020. When work was halted, I was doing a lot of MLS stuff from our stadium when the team was in that MLS's back tournament in that bubble in Orlando. We were calling the games from our broadcast booth off the monitor. I was doing radio play-by-play, also hosting pre and post. But with tennis, after I was doing some Philadelphia Union stuff from that tournament, I got in to do, I do want to say, World Team Tennis at the Greenbrier in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. I did 66 matches in 22 or 23 days on PA, but it really was like almost like being a play-by-play guy, because PA announcing for World Team Tennis is a lot of talking, almost every point, educating the fans who were in attendance. And yes, we did have fans in a controlled environment, in our controlled bubble. Everybody was wearing masks. That led me right after that. I was really in a groove with tennis to doing the U.S. Open, where I was hired to be a radio play-by-play announcer. And how COVID impacted that gig, Griffin, was we were not doing it from the broadcast level. We had access to every court, but we were doing it from the broadcast building behind Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is the large tennis stadium, the largest in the world, in fact, in New York. And so I was in the broadcast office, and they had this big room that was very spaced out. We had the play-by-play person at their own broadcast table, the analyst in, and then there was another set of two for the next crew coming in. And our engineers were behind us. We were all in a mass, and I was calling all this play-by-play off the monitor. Very difficult for someone that doesn't know a lot about tennis. I would say it's one of the more niche sports that you gotta get to know the fundamentals of calling tennis and the different shots. It's not simply, forehand, backhand, here they go in the middle of this first point. The scoring's a little intricate. When it gets to tie breaks, it might get a little bit difficult to follow. So just given my background in the sport and doing it for a little bit, it was an awesome year, because at the U.S. Open, gosh, I want to say they might have had 1,000 to 2,000 credentialed media. It was just us. I was hired by the USTA, the United States Tennis Association, so our World Feed group, and ESPN broadcasting domestically and sharing that picture around the world to all the U.S. Opens, to the rights holders. They weren't credentialed to come to the United States, obviously, because of COVID. So to be one of the few that was credentialed to be broadcasting was a dream come true, and really grateful for the opportunity this year. And there were no fans there, so I was calling the game. We had to wear a mask. I was calling it off the monitor with my analyst. I hosted some days a 30-minute pregame show, getting ready for that specific day. And then my shift sometimes was, a lot of times I got the morning shift. And let's say I would do the morning show, and then for a 3 to 4 hour chunk, I was doing play-by-play of some of the best matches. So I did a Serena Williams match, also did a couple big men's matches that come to mind as well, a couple big upsets too. But we had the freedom to start on Louis Armstrong Stadium, then go to Arthur Ashe Stadium, then go around the grounds. And you asked me the how to call tennis or what's that like. It has a similar tenor on doing radio play-by-play, which tennis play-by-play on TV is more captioning. You're not talking during the point you're laying out. Tennis on the radio, totally different. You're talking. How I tried to get better as the tournament unfolded was not just simply saying Dave's hitting a forehand to Griffin and the points going on in this 15-love point. I would try to mix in a lot of description during the point. So I would get detail-oriented. The hardest part is keeping up with the rally, because the rallies go fast. Sometimes you cannot get in a touch, even though I would challenge myself on a 10 to 15 shot rally to follow the point. But I was getting to the point where, I tried to take myself like I play and kind of go through what I would normally go through the pre-serve routine. So I was watching, let's say it was Jennifer Brady against Angelique Kerber. Jennifer Brady takes the deuce baseline. She tosses the ball 2 feet up in the air, a kick serve out to the backhand of Kerber. She hits a booming shot cross court on the return. And then I had to pick my moments when I can get a little more descriptive. The ball boy gets it ankle high, goes opposite of the chair, right next to the camera well, adjacent to the Mercedes-Benz logo. And then I mix in where the players were during the rally. I thought location was key. So I would say, Serena Williams hits a shot down the alley, 2 feet inside the sideline. So, coming up with these calls and descriptions and to paint this picture, it's really tough because, Griffin, you don't want to fall behind on tennis play-by-play. You can see even now, just retracing my steps, how challenging that is to call a particular point. But, you could say Sophia Kenin is swaying side to side with her left hand on the throat of her Babolat racket, getting ready to return. And she steps up and rips it waist high into the doubles alley, stuff like that. She has the return error, if you will. So it was watching thing before your very eyes, watching the monitor, and then relaying that information to a radio audience. It's very difficult. And I encourage people, people say, how do you get tennis experience? I would say to those watching, when you see the US Open, Wimbledon, or some of the smaller events on, try to do it from your house into a tape recorder. Do it on a live YouTube and just for yourself, or a platform like this, and practice. Do it into your cell phone on your voice memo. Constantly go through the motions of doing a mock radio play-by-play, and you can parallel that to doing ice hockey or doing field hockey, which I have a lot of experience in, or soccer. I remember, doing all the games from my living room house, watching Sixers, Flyers, Phillies games, even Eagles when they play, doing radio play-by-play at home still to this day, doing mock billboards. Like, this game is brought to you by, UPS, what can Brown do for you? Or, Griffin, you're the McDonald's small fry of the game. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Stuff like that, I still do. It drives my wife, and now we have a 10-month-old son, Hudson. I don't like to think it drives him crazy. I think he smiles when I go into announcing mode. But it was great to be there. And again, there were a lot of people that weren't there. So it was a real privilege to be a part of the US Open this year. And I can't wait for many more memories in New York broadcasting tennis.
Well, I'll avoid asking you about the Eagles, but I did want to bring up one of the other teams in Philadelphia, the Union, which you mentioned you do play-by-play for. They just finished up their season, won the Supporters Shield of the regular season title in MLS. Were upset in the MLS playoffs. What was the experience? I know with MLS having first the tournament you're doing remotely, then getting some games in person. And it feels like to me, especially in the last couple of years, soccer is really on the rise in the United States. Where do I guess you assess the MLS level of success and just where soccer is in U.S. sports society right now?
Let me start off by saying this. I want to tell people on here that I remember, I told you at the top of this that at Indiana, I went to Bill Armstrong Stadium, got the equipment from the station house, walk across the campus with like a big suitcase with all the radio equipment, was doing those games, whether it was with a colleague from the radio station or by myself. Then eventually I called games by myself, Indiana men's and women's soccer for the athletics department. On YouTube, there's some really thrilling calls at the time that I like to think have strengthened over time, but I was rather excited, which I have a lot of memories broadcasting Indiana men's and women's soccer. But now to think, you fast forward 9 or 10 years since graduating, now I'm doing MLS games with the Union. I have a pretty cool role with them where you mentioned I do play-by-play, but I have a hybrid role. Not only do I do play-by-play, but when my colleague JP Delacamera, who is the #1 play-by-play guy, is on, I'm also a co-host on our pregame, halftime, and postgame shows. We have no teleprompter on those shows on a set where I'm like I said, I'm a co-host. Sometimes I am the host. Sometimes I can play analyst. I have a hybrid role, which is amazing, and it really helps my skill set and my marketability moving forward in the broadcast business. And I also do radio play-by-play. And I was shaking my head when you're talking about that we lost to New England in the first round of the playoffs after winning the Supporters Shield. For those that don't know, it's best record in Major League Soccer. Really big deal to win our first trophy in our 11-year history at the Union. The league has grown, to your question, substantially from just the 5 years that I got in with the Philadelphia Union to this point, but going back. And I'll give you one example. The Union just sold a player to Red Bull Salzburg and Brendan Aronson. I think he just turned 20. And this kid was sold for $9 million. They use that phrase, by the way, for those that aren't familiar with soccer, as a transfer. That's what they say, players being sold. And that deal is huge for MLS. I'll tell you why. Aronson's a rising star at such a young age. He's maybe will debut again for the U.S. men's national team, getting his, I believe it would be his first start. I believe he has capped before or has been in training with the national team. But good to see him and Mark McKenzie down there from the Union getting ready for the U.S. men's national team game. But MLS improving because there's the commitment to playing the kids right away. The Union are one of those MLS teams, along with FC Dallas, who have exceptional academies. This is not a MLS like you often hear a lot of the reporters saying MLS 1.0 and 2.0, where they're playing, guys that are coming from Europe in almost like a retirement league. That's not the case. There are so many talented young kids, what we call homegrowns, coming from their backyard that are playing for the Union or for the Chicago Fire or for the San Jose Earthquakes. And a couple from Indiana have gotten time in MLS, have a big history of getting kids from MLS, from Indiana soccer to Major League Soccer. And it's growing because now the Aronson case, my example today, he's going to Europe to play a big role, but also will help the U.S. national team when they play international matches, right? But they can sell a kid like Aronson for $9 million. That wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago, where you're taking homegrown talent, young kids, and selling them to Europe. You could say it was almost in reverse, but a huge reversal, right? Because you were taking guys that were over the hill and were seeing the end of their soccer days playing in the United States. And I think MLS is definitely changing the pendulum there, Griffin, where you're having these young kids. We have so much talent here in our nation that they can play in some of these other fantastic leagues around the world. We're seeing that with Pulisic, with Chelsea in the Premier League. And Weston McKennie just had that amazing goal in Champions League for Juve. So there's a lot of talent. I think the national team not making the World Cup in the last go-around really hurt as probably a lot of soccer followers know. But for Qatar and then for the U.S., Canada, Mexico World Cup in 2026, I hope we get one of the games in Philadelphia, one of the rounds, which would be awesome. I think the community here is really behind it. So I think that MLS is growing since then. I think the talent level has really increased. And I think you're seeing not just college kids come in and make an impact from the draft, but you're also seeing kids, younger kids, these GMs and these talent evaluators in MLS are finding kids from around the world. And people are starting to see the growth, the maturity in American soccer and how talented the league is. In just my 5 years, to see the growth of the Philadelphia Union firsthand, see these young kids. We play a lot of these kids. We're not a team that has a $3, $4, $5 million player on our team. So when you see these young kids mixed in with, some veterans that have played with the U.S. national team, but those that have played overseas and are making an impact mixed in with our homegrowns, it has been a thrill to be a part of. And to do all those games from the studio was tough and challenging. I like to think I have a lot of experience calling games from the studio, which we can get into. But doing the games without fans felt like I was back, in the minors where I could count 12 people in the stands and I was broadcasting to seemingly nobody, but I still project that energy, that enthusiasm, as if Subaru Park in Chester, Pennsylvania was packed. So unfortunately that we got bounced out of the first round to New England. But looking forward to watching the final between Seattle and Columbus.
That's coming up, and it's amazing, Dave, how many different things you've even done just with limited sports now and over the course of your career. And wanted to ask you about one more cool opportunity. The Army-Navy game is coming up on Saturday. You had the opportunity to call the Coast Guard versus the Merchant Marines on ESPN College Football recently. That's not something you hear about as much. What was that experience like for you?
That was quite the honor to do that game because, as the coaches told me from those respective service academies, that's the D3 version, like you said, of Army-Navy. And that game meant so much to those service academies because that was the only game that those two schools were playing in college football that season. There have been a couple D3 games, that's at the Division III level. There were a couple in the West region that were going on. I believe that was the first D3 game in the East region to take place. So it meant a lot because those seniors for those two schools were playing their last college football game ever. So I put a lot of time and preparation to deliver on that call, just like I would for any other game. But I had to learn a lot, and I mean a lot, about the service academies outside of the football X's and O's and about who the quarterback is and why this kid's getting his first career start at wide receiver or at tight end or what happened in the last game. I had no film to go off of from that year. So that made it challenging because when I do play-by-play, I'm really big about watching previous games. I'll even go back to 2 or 3 games in a season that those teams have played. And it will not only help with identification, but I'll pick up on tendencies that I can ask coaches and players or the media relations contact about when I speak to them. This year, we've had to do a lot of those meetings on Zoom. Some of them have been over the phone. But for that Coast Guard Merchant Marine game, I learned so much about what those young men put into the service academies and the sacrifice that they make helping to defend our great country. I learned that the Merchant Marine go out on a sea year where they're away from campus. Their sophomore year they're away for 4 months. Their junior year they're away from 8 months. The Coast Guard has to have a 5-year commitment to the Coast Guard upon graduating. Now, the Merchant Marine kids the academy graduates can actually join the Coast Guard after, or other branch of service in our military. So there were a lot of cool nuggets, a lot of cool traditions that we showed graphically, and I wanted to tell a lot of cool stories behind that. And then obviously calling the football game and speaking with the coaches and worked with Ken Dunnick. We had our great spotter, Eric Hauser, in the booth with us there. It was so awesome to do that game in Kings Point, New York. And I like to think that those individuals that was a dream come true for them, just getting a game that year, because I like to think that they thought they weren't going to play a game, and especially for those seniors that were then going overseas and to defend our great country, and for them to get a game like that for everything they do on their campus. A lot of them elected to stay on campus, and in the Merchant Marine Academy, those kids elected to stay in a bubble since July. I believe the same for the Coast Guard as well, doing a lot of cool intramural sports. I go into stories like the game was yesterday. And then to have a thrilling call, it was a 10-point game. Merchant Marine won. To just have that assignment to do, very much like Army Navy, and just to go through a game like that and go through all that rigorous prep, it meant the world to me to get the call to do that game. And I'm forever grateful to ESPN for having me on that, and the people I worked with to help get us prepared. And I feel like we did an awesome job executing for all the stakeholders involved, and hope to be part of it in 2021 in New London, Connecticut, where the Coast Guard Academy is.
It sounds like an awesome experience. And so you've already given us so many great nuggets of advice for people in the journalism and broadcast industry. And just want to pick your brain one more time on what you see kind of as the future of the industry. You mentioned we've seen a lot more remote broadcasts lately, obviously with the pandemic. What do you see as the future of the industry, and what's your biggest nugget of advice for aspiring journalists, broadcasters, and people trying to make it in the media field?
Great question, Griffin. And I will say that this theme of remote broadcasting is nothing new. I mentioned just some of my experience doing games from Big Ten Network in 2012, doing soccer out of there, and other Olympic sports. I did Japanese baseball out of a studio in Stamford, Connecticut. I would go in at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, get a lineup in Japanese. Now, I knew who the players were by names and by numbers, by their field position in baseball, and also their uniform number, not by the names. I don't know Japanese. But that was such a challenging on-air opportunity. I was by myself calling a 4-hour game and just calling it off the monitor with very little prep at my disposal. Very, very difficult, but I got through it. And that's what I'll say to a lot of people watching today. You will get through this, and we're all going to get through this together. If you're coming out of school, you're in school, the gigs are few and far that are available. There's a lot of people out of school right now that are struggling. There's a lot of people that are getting laid off from not only minor league baseball, from their various teams and networks or organizations that they work with. It's very competitive. But just understand, there is a spot for you out there. And it might not be at first what you want to end up doing for the rest of your life. And I'm not saying just take anything just to take it. But that's what I talk about versatility to everybody. There's a lot of play-by-play announcers probably watching this that want to do football and basketball and maybe baseball, and that's it. I love those sports too. But a lot of my opportunities at a young age have been with the Olympic sports, soccer, field hockey, tennis, softball, and others. Volleyball, I was really, really big on. I did a Sunbelt Volleyball Championship game in 2013, 2014 at Western Kentucky, and also at Troy University. And I like to think if I didn't do Indiana volleyball and some on the Big Ten Network, even with Student U right before I graduated, I would never have got those opportunities. So try to get your skill set in a multitude of areas in broadcasting, whether it's the writing aspect, the photography, the PR. And I know a lot of people on here probably have heard that message before. And convergence media, I think, was such a new thing back in when I was in college, where you have to not only write a story, but you have to shoot the story, blog about it, maybe give a little radio clip. But I think that's huge today. Can you do, 5, 6, 7 jobs in one? I think, do you know graphic design, for example, especially if you want to go the minor league baseball route? Can you produce press releases and game notes if you want to be a baseball broadcaster or another minor league announcer, maybe in hockey? That's really important. Remote broadcasting, getting back to that, I know I'm talking in a lot of areas. I'm jumping around because this topic makes me excited. I do believe there are opportunities out there. And I do believe more and more will come back as we hopefully sooner rather than later get rid of this virus, or keep it down, keep the cases close to zero as we can in the future. And I think that folks wanting to apply to places need to utilize their contacts, but also take a breath. If you get rejected, understand that rejection happens. Work towards that one yes. I used to tell myself I would get 20, 30, 40 no's before I got that opportunity. And then over the years, I can tell you I'm a good example. After getting rejected from a place, then I got in with something, with a minor league team. One gig because you met somebody liked your talent, turned into two, turned into three. If you would have told me at Indiana that, I guess 5 or 6 years upon graduating Indiana, I would be an announcer with an MLS team, I would have laughed. But it happened. If you would have told me that, I would have got in at ESPN in 2012 at 22 years old, when I was a freshman or a sophomore in Indiana, I would have said, you're crazy. But it happened. And it didn't happen because somebody pushed me along the way. Griffin, it took a lot of belief, self-confidence, and hard work, and I made the most of my opportunity. I was doing games for free out of college. I remember calling a school and saying, hey, can I come do a mock game in your press box? Do you have an open booth? I can bring a friend. I'll get my own equipment. I just want the opportunity to get a credential. I just want to make a demo tape. And a lot of times I got a no, but I remember one school in particular gave me that opportunity, and that was awesome. I made a little football radio play-by-play, and it just went to me, myself, and I sent that out to a few people for just some critiques and some advice. Did some high school games for nothing or for $25. I think if you're in it for the money at a young age, this is not the path for you. Are you in it for the long haul? I will say that some announcers, if you're in it, or some people in the media business, do make it at a young age, and that's okay. Maybe they have a famous parent, a cousin, a father, or a mother. Maybe they hook up with an agent. Maybe the agency likes them. I like to think that a lot of that, has to do with somebody being a champion for them. And I think you do need somebody out there in a hiring position to take a liking to you and to push you along the way. But don't be afraid if that one network or that one organization says no. When you're making these contacts, I know I'm giving a lot here, Griffin, but when you're making contacts to people at places you want to be, don't ask for a job. Keep your email short. Pick up the phone. Nobody uses their phone today. Everything's just an email. Look, and I'm even guilty of that because it's the easy thing too, right? The easy thing to do. You hide behind an email because you don't want to. People don't really want a phone call, and sometimes you make that call and somebody lashes out saying, "Listen, I don't have time for this." So there's a lot of things that those of you that are not working, or you might be in between seasons, can do now. Set yourself up for success further down the road. I'm losing my voice here because there's just so much things that I've learned when I've been out of work, where I've lost gigs or I've gained gigs. There's so many lessons, but I like to think a lot of the opportunity that I can only speak for myself has come from people that have taken a chance on me, that I know how hard I work, how I treat people. And somebody just has to take a liking to your work too. And I'm hopeful, everybody watching today, I'm hopeful that happens and you can achieve your dreams. I think there are so many jobs for all of us out there. I think a lot of people in the business look over their shoulders saying, what's Dave doing this week? What's Joe doing? Why aren't I calling a game this week? We're all guilty of that, but you can't have that mindset. That's not going to prolong you for success and longevity in this business. That first gig, that second gig, that third gig might not be that dream opportunity for you, but if it can get you along your path and when the time's right to leave and look for somewhere else, then you go about it, Griffin. But don't worry about the type of gig that you're doing. If you're a college student, what the magnitude of that assignment. Get a tape, get copies of your work, keep it, put it on YouTube, put it on your website, send it to as many people as you can. And hopefully one day you'll get your foot in the door somewhere, God willing, and you'll work your way up in the industry that you're striving to be in for a very long time. But if you're not willing to put in the hard work, the sacrifice, the rejection, the amount of hours being ignored, whether it's by email or on the phone, then I would say this isn't the right path. Don't compare yourself to other people in the business. You may have friends going to the Kelley School of Business that might be making a great salary out of school. And, they might have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They might start a family. They might get a cool house and a cool car and start making money. But for those of you that in media, you feel like you're far behind, don't sweat it. If you're in it for the long haul, stick it out, keep that confidence, that belief up, even when you're not working, and know when you do get that on-air opportunity, you can make the most of it. And that's what I told myself all the time. And you see, I'm a very positive person. Everybody has rejection, and I mentioned dejection, and those negative thoughts. Will I make it? Will I get this opportunity? And of course, it's crossed my mind too. But I've always told myself, when I'm not working, when I'm not calling a game, what's one or two things that day that I can get better in broadcasting? And it might not be just doing a mock broadcast. It might be spending, an hour watching a YouTube broadcast or demos of someone that has gotten those opportunities. Hey, what are they doing that I'm not? Or, hey, can I spend a day maybe making some cold calls or some cold emails and doing some research and seeing if I can connect with somebody? Not asking for a job, but maybe starting a relationship. And I know a lot of that's easier said than done, believe me. But if you don't try, I feel you're going to have a hard time making it in this industry. And I'll end with this. I know there's a lot there. For those of you that are in college or a young person, keep in contact with the colleagues in school. You might not be friends with every kid that's in your class, but for those of you that are in similar industries, keep in the know of where they are, and maybe he or she can help you when they go along their path. Maybe they get to a spot that you aspire to go to. Maybe they can help you connect the dots. Or it's professors, use their contacts, how they can help you moving forward. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. Swallow your pride. Ask somebody, look, I think I'm ready for this next step. How do I get there? And maybe that person can get you along the way. Sometimes the answer is going to be no. Like I said, it takes that one yes from from a particular team, network, organization to get you the gig. And that's the end of my rant, as I'm losing my voice.
Well, Dave, I mean, you can see how passionate you are just about broadcasting and students in broadcasting. So that was a lot of great advice. And I know all the people watching and going back and watching that really enjoyed hearing that. I don't want to make you lose your voice any further. So really quickly, one last question for you, a little bit of a fun one. What is your favorite place to spend time in Bloomington? A restaurant, place on campus, a park? If you had to pick one, what would be number one?
Gosh, number one. Well, I think there were a lot of nights spent at Buffalo's comes to mind, just grabbing a bite in between classes with friends. I know the food's great. I love all the memorabilia. That's you can tell by the way I'm answering your questions today, and probably a lot of people watching like, why is Dave just keep going on and on and on, right? Getting around the question, but I love Malibu Grill. That's really good food. I know I can't just give you one. You're tough, right? When broadcast producers say, less is more when calling a game, it's hard. You can tell for me, one of the things that I've been working on is trying to scale back with my calls and be a little bit more simple in my delivery and how I sound. You can tell why that's difficult for me. I can talk about this all day. So definitely those two, Buffalo's, Malibu Grill. Spent a lot of days at Yogi's before that closed down. I think it's now back, right?
It is back, yes.
I'm happy to hear that's back, and a lot of the other cool spots along Kirkwood too. I miss it. It's a beautiful campus. I was the only one from my high school from the Philadelphia area to go there. Another kid went from the other high school in our district. He went there, and I did from my high school. A lot of fond memories in Indiana. And for those watching that are in Indiana, you're at an amazing school. And if it wasn't for being an IU and taking advantage of all the opportunities, I will say that it wasn't like these opportunities were like, all right, Dave, come on in, we'll have you. No, I had to go get them. And I think that's the hardest step for somebody that's new to a campus. Is like you have to make the most of the opportunities that are out there, but you have to be a go-getter. And I think that's one of the things that's really defined me, Griffin, is I'm a go-getter. I like to go for things. And look, sometimes people might not like you, and sometimes people will say, hey, there's no opportunity. That's okay. You move on to the next thing. And I like to think in Indiana, I went after a lot of those opportunities, some that were amazing experiences. Others were learning lessons that maybe didn't work out, that have made me the person that I am today. So miss everybody out in Bloomington. Hopefully everybody's safe and healthy out there the best they can. I know it might not be the college experience that you're wanting, but hopefully everybody does their job. We contain the virus, and you guys can get on to enjoying the campus, and hopefully those big lecture halls at Ballantyne shrink, though, or Woodward, and you can have a lot of fun with friends and make a lot of college memories at Indiana. Look forward to getting back out there. Haven't been back on campus in a long time, so when this stuff ends, I hope to be back out in Bloomington.
We'd love to see you back out here in Bloomington, and it was just a pleasure talking to you even remotely today, Dave. So much great advice. Great to hear about all your experiences, and I know so many people at the IU Media School look up to you and everything you do. Just really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Griffin. And what you're doing with this platform, you and your colleagues, is awesome. Keep it up, and what you're doing at your age is really something that you are going to remember doing this as you move along in this business. If this is the path you want to go along, and this will help you moving forward. Having interviews like this, how we're talking right now on a split screen, is exactly how they do it on SportsCenter, on First Take, or the NFL on Fox, their pregame show, or CBS. So basically what I'm saying is, Griffin, put on a suit, call Fox, get in there, and try out for Kurt Menefee's job when he's done.
I'm hoping so, maybe in some years in the future, Dave. I really appreciate that, and again, appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, have a great day.
All right, that was Dave Leno. What an awesome segment today on Unpaid Interns. If you missed this episode or any of our past Unpaid Interns episodes, always you can check them out on our IU Sports Media YouTube page in their entirety, or you can listen to them on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We're going to be off on Friday, but we're going to be back next week, and we have a couple very special shows with some special guests lined up. I'm going to leave it a surprise, not give it away, but we hope you join us again on Monday for another episode of Unpaid Interns. Until then, take care.